From Ja Morant's suspension for messing around with a gun, to using penalties to keep gun-owning players in check, here's the NBA's gun culture explained. The conversation about guns and the NBA heated up thanks to Morant, who posted a video in which he was waving a gun around. That was the second time he did this, and the first time round he was suspended for 8 games. The league's had enough of his shenanigans now, hitting the point guard with a 25-game suspension with no pay. He'll be missing out on a big chunk of the 2023-2024 season, and he'll also have to stay out of any events or activities related to the NBA or his team, the Memphis Grizzlies. This suspension's going to cost Morant $7.5 million, and fans can only hope that he's learned his lesson now. While this is going on, Morant's also been caught in the crossfire of a civil suit against Devontae Pack, a close friend who's being sued for assaulting a teenager at Morant's house in the summer of 2022. The reason Morant's been punished so harshly is because he didn't learn from the last time. But the NBA's been involved in a small political debate in the US, the never-ending fight over guns. The Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States gives citizens the right to bear arms. It also says some other things, but the country's divided on whether that stuff counts. Because of this amendment and a history of court rulings on the issue of guns, America has the most guns per capita of any country in the world, and it isn't even close. There's a whole culture around guns in the country, and lots of Americans take pride in amassing collections of weapons. The fact that Morant's waving his pistol around on video, and he's far from the only one, shows that guns aren't taken very seriously. Sure, no one will ever confess to wanting to use those guns on other people, but it does happen. Year after year, the US has been one of the worst countries in the world in gun deaths. And whether you're American or not, you can't avoid the headlines about all the gun crimes that happen in the US, from mass shootings in public, to massacres in schools, to police carrying out excessive violence against the Black community. What can America do about these crimes? Well, some say that guns need to be banned, and others say that gun control laws are needed to regulate who can get guns. But some say that the government should tackle the personal issues of potential mass shooters instead, and then you have the crowd that simply says that the whole thing's overblown. For this video, I want to zero in on the NBA. And as an American company, it's hard to take a stand on many of the country's political issues. Under the lead of Commissioner Adam Silver, the league tends to lean left on most debates. When it comes to guns, their planes, stadiums, and practice arenas are among the few places where no one, under any circumstances, can bring a firearm. Being anti-gun control's a bad look these days, especially for a company that employs many Black Americans, one of the communities that are most affected by gun violence. But the NBA also wants to be on the same page as many of its biggest stars, most of whom have spoken out in favor of gun regulation. LeBron James is just one of the stars who's been outspoken on guns, promoting gun control whenever an incident goes down, such as after the school shooting in Uvalde, Texas. Steph Curry's another MVP who's thrown his hat in the ring, and in 2015, he appeared in a PSA that the league was airing during games. Heck, way back in 2008, when things hadn't gotten this bad, Karl Malone was asking what NBA players thought they needed guns for. But the biggest statement the NBA ever made about guns was in 2020, when the Black Lives Matter movement really flared up. Early in 2020, the murder of George Floyd became the biggest news story in the world right after the COVID pandemic. The unrest was turned up all the way to 11 when months later, the police in Kenosha shot Jacob Blake 7 times, which they said was because they feared he was going to attack them. This is where the NBA drew the line, as the Milwaukee Bucks boycotted their playoff against the Orlando Magic, and the league postponed all their games. When the players came back, they wore slogans supporting Floyd and Blake, and many players spoke out against police brutality, urging the government to hold police accountable and to finally solve the gun crisis in America. If the NBA hadn't sided with the Bucks and the other teams, those guys wouldn't be playing for them anymore. It's clear that stars like LeBron, Curry, and others want to play for a league that shares their views, and as you can see, people get pretty passionate about the issue of guns. There haven't been any players going against gun control and regulation, but many NBA players don't think guns are a big deal. I think it's safe to say that Morant's one player who thinks guns are just toys, and he isn't even the first one to pose with guns online. Chris Kaman had a long career with the league, playing from 2003 to 2016, and Steven Jackson pointed out that this whole time, no one ever busted him for posing with some serious firepower on Twitter. Maybe posing with guns really isn't a big deal to some, but there have been worse gun incidents involving NBA players, like Raymond Felton's 4-game suspension in 2014, which happened after he threatened his wife with a gun, leading him to plead guilty to criminal possession of a firearm. And to take this up a notch, NBA players have been involved in actual shootings. Javaris Crittenton found himself in the slammer, with charges of voluntary manslaughter with a weapon and aggravated assault with a firearm, as was the 90s Nets star Jason Williams. Keith Appling played a whopping 5 games with the Orlando Magic before beginning an 18 to 40-year sentence in prison, charged with a triple whammy of murder, firearm, and drug charges. When the NBA has stuff like this in its history, it has to be careful about the way it deals with gun-related incidents. What makes this harder for the organization is that they draft players out of college and young people don't make the best choices, do they? Morant was just 20 when he was drafted into the NBA, and it didn't take long for him to become an MVP for the Grizzlies. The guy's making more money than most 20-year-olds can dream of, on top of being a basketball superstar. He also has brand deals and a signature shoe with Nike. All this is a lot of responsibility to put on someone his age, which is why his defenders have been asking if the NBA may have punished him too harshly. But it's not just that some of the players are young. Many basketball fans are too, and they look up to the best players of their teams. As part of their corporate social responsibility, the NBA doesn't want players like Morant to inspire their fans to get careless with guns. Not in a country where it'd be so easy for them to get their hands on a weapon. Another thing that Morant should be careful about is how it looks for a Memphis player to be so reckless about guns. Just months before Morant posted his first gun videos, the Scorpion unit of the Memphis Police was under fire for alleged racial profiling of black people, and members of the unit had beaten Tyre Nichols to death. It was a bad time for Morant to be acting out. I don't think Morant's career is over or anything, but this is an important moment for the NBA's relationship with guns. Suspending Morant for 25 games wasn't just about teaching him a lesson, it was a message for everyone in the NBA. Keep your guns to yourselves. As long as Americans have a right to bear arms, they have a responsibility to handle them with care, and they shouldn't be out there wilding out with their weapons. If Morant can keep his nose clean once he comes out of his suspension, this whole controversy will just be a subsection on his Wikipedia page, and for what it's worth, I think he's going to be okay. Other gun-owning basketball players should take note, because while the league can't confiscate their guns, they'd better hope that they don't tighten the screws on their gun rules, since there's no question where the NBA stands on this issue. So there you have it. From using penalties to keep gun-owning players in check, to Ja Morant learning the hard way what happens when you break the rules, that's the NBA's gun culture explained.